class we will discuss an exercise on the break-even point. The starting point still is represented by our brewery company that realizes beer type A, and we have the following data that are available. We have that the unitary price is 1.10 euros per unit, then we know the unitary variable cost of 0.85 euros per unit, and then we know the fixed costs that are 25 euros. Given this data, we are required to calculate how many units should the company produce and sell in order to break even. That's our question. How we can address this problem? By calculating the quantity to break even. And our starting point is the traditional equation for calculating the net operating income. We need to write down the equation of the net operating income, remembering to set the difference between the revenue and the costs equal to 0, because the quantity to break even is the quantity at which total costs equal total revenues. So basically, if we say that the revenues, which is the price multiplied by the quantity minus the total costs that are provided by variable costs multiplied by the quantity minus the fixed costs. If we set this equation equals to 0, and then if we isolate Q, we can identify the quantity to break even. So we have that the quantity to break even equals the fixed cost divided by the price minus the variable costs. So if we look at our data, we have 25 divided by 1.10 minus 0.85, so 0.25 euros. So that we have the quantity to break even is 100 units. This means that if the company wants to cover the cost, should produce and sell 100 units. We can also graphically represent our quantity to break even by plotting the quantity on the horizontal axis with respect to total revenues and then total costs. Total revenues have this shape because it is price multiplied by the quantity. If the quantity is 0, then the revenue is 0. So this is the total revenue. Then we can plot also the total costs, and we know that the starting point of the total cost curve is 25, because if you look at the data, even though the company produces and sells 0 units, we will have a fixed cost of 25. So the starting point is here, and then we have the total cost curve. This point is the point in which total revenues equals total costs. And this quantity is 100 units, and this is exactly the quantity to break even. Given this data, the problem requires us also to calculate the quantity in order to achieve a certain net operating income. Specifically, if we look at our data, we need to calculate the quantity in order to achieve a net operating income of 200 euros. So basically, we are required to calculate the quantity at which our net operating income is equal to 200 euros. How we can calculate this quantity? If you remember the formula, we just need to calculate the quantity for achieving a target net operating income that is exactly the same formula to break even, just setting the equation rather than equal to 0 equal to our target net operating income. So basically this formula will become fixed costs plus a target net operating income divided by the price minus the variable costs. So if we apply the formula, we will have 25 plus 200 euros divided by 0.25. If we solve the equation, we will have that we need to produce and sell 900 units of our beers in order to achieve a net operating income of 200 euros. So if we plot this quantity to achieve this net operating income, we will have that the quantity to achieve the target profit is here. So in here we have 900 units. So if you look at the equations that we solved, you can see that our starting point is always the net operating income equation, and then we can solve the equation by the quantity to break even or by the quantity to achieve a net operating income depending on our specific objective. One last reasoning by looking at this graph, because you can see that this quantity to break even. I know I'm stressing this point, but the quantity to break even is crucial, because if the company produces a quantity that is less than 100 units, you can see that we have a loss. The other way around, 101 units will provide a profit. So let's say that the dividing point is this 100 units. So it is very useful to identify this quantity, because this splits between the loss and then the profit that can be achieved by the company.